So this week's episode of the Lovefly Podcast, we welcome Amy Julia, and thank you very much for joining. There's an interesting angle today, and I don't think we've done this before. So perhaps you could tell the humans watching and listening a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Amy Julia Becker, have a funny double first name, and I appreciate you using it. I'm in Connecticut in the United States, and I have really what's brought me here on this podcast is I have 3 children. My oldest daughter, Penny, is 20 years old and has Down syndrome. I have a son and a daughter who are younger than she is. And I do a lot of writing and speaking and teaching in the areas of faith and family and disability. And I wrote a post a couple months ago because Penny was going to be flying on her own for the first time. And so that I think is what caught, your attention and got us connected to each other, and has really been kind of an interesting experience to think and write and reflect on just over the course of these past couple months as we've gone from preparing for her to fly to actually having the experience and now being able to look back on that.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. That was very succinct as well, in less than 60 seconds.
Well, so, I can say lots more,
Yeah, well,
it's kind of an all or nothing.
Hopefully you will. It's going to be a very short podcast. So let's get into then a little bit let's tell us about Penny and the situation for you. And I think the angle that we were interested in, and there could be others as well, is the fact that, you are parents of anybody that are nervous, that they go and travel. Then you add in Penny has, did you say Down syndrome? So,
yeah,
that's another thing to think about as well. And I know that a lot of people that listen to our podcasts, we get all sorts of people with all sorts of situations that they're dealing with. And we just thought, wow, that's really interesting. And no doubt you'll have some wisdom that'll help others. No pressure.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to speak to that because about 10 years ago, maybe, we started, I guess it was 8 years ago, when Penny was about 12 years old and in middle school, we started talking about using public transportation on her own. And even that felt scary, going on a bus or going on a train or, anything like that. And we've been working on that over the course of many years. We do fly a fair amount as a family, so this was not a completely unusual experience for her or for us in terms of just being on an airplane, which I know for many families that's not the case, and so that would feel like its own kind of scary situation. And our son flew for the first time, I think, when he was 16, and I remember dropping him off and feeling like, oh gosh, like as a parent, I didn't expect this to feel a little bit intimidating, but it did. And so we got to this point where we started to think about maybe sometime in the future figuring out what it would look like for Penny to fly alone. And yet we didn't really have any plans for that. But we have gone to a summer camp in Alabama, which is like deep in the south of the United States, for many years. And Penny was invited to go for a week ahead of us. Okay. And I said to the woman who invited her, well, that's fine, but I don't understand how you think she would get there. I know she could do the week without us at camp, but what are you talking about? And she said to me, well, you would put her on an airplane. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not putting her on an airplane. And she said, well, I mean, if you feel comfortable and if she feels comfortable, then you can do that. And she's also a mom who has kids with disabilities and just was kind of encouraging me to really expand my imagination for what might be possible for Penny. And so I talked to Penny about it and she was like, yeah, no big deal. I mean, for her, this was not a news story. For me, it was. But for her, she thought, sure, I've been on an airplane before. What does it matter if you're there or not? And so we started to just explore what are there provisions within the structure of an airport, an airline, for people with disabilities to have some measure of security and as a mom to know that she will be safe, or as safe as we can imagine her being. And so, so that's where this all started, was with an invitation. It was not something that we were really planning on having happen this summer, but an invitation, and then the beginning of some conversations in our family and explorations of how to make this really both safe, but also possible for her. And the story continues from there.
Yeah. Okay. And was Penny nervous of flying in any way, shape or form?
Not that she ever admitted to me. So I certainly had a lot more nerves than she did. We did, she was flying out of LaGuardia Airport. So New York City, big airport.
Yeah.
Lots of people. And again, she has flown in and out of there before, but at first I didn't understand. I mean, jumping to the end of the story, it is actually very easy for a mom to go and get what's called a gate pass and just walk with her to the gate and see her, get in line to get on the plane. But I didn't know that. And so I started off by thinking I was going to be letting her go through security alone. And that was kind of going to be the end of it. We could check in through text or something. But so I just called the airline, and the person I spoke with didn't tell me that I could go with Penny to the gate. And so she gave me lots of other advice about how to do this. And one of the things that was actually a really cool part of the story was recognizing the airlines are, at least Delta was set up to want to encourage this type of flight happening. And that was really an encouragement to me. I posted on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, all these places, and I asked people for advice for other parents and just said, how would you do this? And got tons of responses. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people reached out, whether through those messaging systems or through email, some to share some horror stories, which were good to kind of know as a parent that things can go wrong, but mostly to say, here's what has happened in the past, 10 or 20 years to make it possible for young adults with disabilities to travel independently. It's kind of funny to use the word independent because I don't think any of us do anything independently. We all do it because of the support that we give each other along the way. But there are lots of programs, whether it's through TSA or through airlines or through airports, to both identify and support people with both physical and intellectual disabilities that I had no idea about. And one of the things that was also actually so encouraging to me as a nervous mother, sending my kid, to fly for the first time, the fact that hundreds of people responded and wanted to essentially, some people said, I don't have any advice. I'm just so excited that this is happening. And it makes me think I want to look for Penny in the airport. Just that sense of people wanting to be a part of making this possible for her and for our family was really encouraging, because sometimes you think everyone out there is either in their own world and they don't care, or they have some bad intentions. And instead it was like, no, we'd love when we have a very specific and small way we can support one another as humans. I think we really like to do it. So anyway, that was all very encouraging to me. So in this case, the nerves were with the mom, not so much with the person flying.
So I think that's quite heartening to hear. You think about all those people that you don't know at all, and they're doing these acts of kindness. That's great. A great news story straight away. We're only 8 minutes in. There's already some good news. That's good. So you flew with Delta, and you also, so talk us through how you helped prepare Penny. And it sounds like Penny was fine. How did you prepare yourself whilst pretending to be preparing Penny?
Yeah, that's a great way to ask it. I mean, again, I did learn some things along the way. As far as, I gave myself a lot of time getting to the airport. I usually am one of those people who cuts it pretty close and was like, nope, we are going to get there super early. And one of the things that we've been doing over many years is when we get to an airport, having Penny navigate herself to the gate, even if we are there, so that she is becoming more able to do that without a parent with her. In this case, we were advised, and I wouldn't have known this without the advice of Delta / other people online, we needed to not check in online in order to get the gate pass so that I could accompany Penny to the gate, because we needed to just go and talk to a gate agent and have her check in that way. And so they just gave me the gate pass that I needed. But again, it was good for us to have. I probably gave an extra hour in terms of just navigating the airport than what I usually would have done. And we went through, we had so much time. It's a big airport. There were not very many people there that day, which was actually a nice thing. But Penny also got in, and I think we realized, you know what? The first time you will ever take yourself to a gate by yourself is going to be at a smaller airport. We're not going to do that at LaGuardia to start. That's not where we're going to, So I think that sense of being scaffolded in how support happens, where it's like you just take away one piece at a time rather than all of it all at once. Yeah. And so, she I think on the preparation side, the biggest thing was just making sure there was enough time and getting advice from other people. We also were sent, there was one person who saw this post online and they sent us like a sensory kit. So for people, especially on the autism spectrum and other, who have neurodivergence, I think one of the things that can be overwhelming in a space like an airport or an airplane is like an overload of sensory experiences.
Yeah.
And Penny doesn't have many of those needs, but it still gave me, again, this kind of, it's called the sensory store, the place that provides these kind of packages, but it had a small weighted blanket and weighted stuffed animal and noise canceling headphones and some fidgets. And those all, again, weren't something that Penny felt like she needed personally, but they did give me a sense of how, as a mom, you might help prepare your child depending on what their needs are, just to think through, what is this going to be like for them on the plane? We also got a swag bag from Delta. They sent us some materials and it was a lot of cool stuff. But the thing that Penny was the most grateful for was the portable charger that they sent. But even just thinking about that, like if your kid is going by themselves for the first time, to be sure that they can charge their phone and communicate with you. The one I mentioned, kind of having a friend who told me a bit of a horror story. That horror story was a young man with Down syndrome who got on an airplane. His parents were, kind of saw him off and onto the plane, but the door hadn't closed yet. They left and he got off the plane because he got agitated for some reason and didn't communicate with anyone about it. He was found, he was fine, but that point of just making sure that you have some pretty clear means of communication. And also, if you do have a child or young adult, in Penny's case, this is not how she typically is. But if you have a child who might get anxious or agitated in a situation like that, then having, again, some kind of plans for how to handle that seems like a really important thing, but also something that's very possible. So those are some of the things that we did in anticipation. And then I guess the final thing I'll say is just we also had a friend waiting on the other end. So our friend who had invited her to come to camp also got to the airport early, went to the gate, got a gate pass and just came and waited and greeted Penny. And, again, once she landed, my friend communicated with me. Penny did not. She's like, oh, yeah, I'm good. I know exactly what's happening. I know what I'm doing. And off I go. So
brilliant. I didn't know about the gate.
That was what we needed. Yeah.
So the gate pass sounds like it could be a US thing, maybe. I don't know.
It's a good question. It's certainly a US thing. And as far as I could tell, it was a very easy, you just go show your ID. They give you the gate pass. And so that was an easier solution than I knew of as a possibility. There also are, if I had wanted to, for example, walk in with Penny, but not go through security for whatever reason, TSA, which obviously is an American thing, they also have a way for a TSA agent to escort you through the security line.
Okay.
Delta would provide someone to take her to the gate. It was really interesting, though. The only way for her to have someone take her to the gate and stay with her until she got on the airplane was if she used a wheelchair, which she doesn't need and did not have any interest in. But that is something you can do, is say, okay, I'm going to have someone assist me by pushing me in a wheelchair all the way onto the airplane, and then the reverse. That's a possibility. Another possibility is having someone just escort you to the gate, which is to say, like, navigate the terminal, but then they would leave you at the gate. And so some people would be concerned if my child is like left at the gate and then there's a flight delay, or they decide to go to the bathroom and they don't find their way back, or, a lot of this I think has to do with knowing who the needs of the person who is trying to get on the airplane and what level of support is needed, which is part of, for us, the learning experience was, okay, next time we will, if we want her to have less support, and if she wants that for herself, we'll need to be in a smaller airport. Right now at LaGuardia, we're going to the gate, but maybe over time that will change.
Yeah. Yes. Well, big monster airports like that. I remember. So you mentioned Delta and you said about a swag bag and stuff. It sounds like they're really geared up to make travel inclusive. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about some of the stuff.
Yeah, it is actually, that was another thing through this whole experience that was really remarkable to me, was that I can tell this story as like my daughter, as an individual who did this thing. or my friend who encouraged my daughter to do this thing. But it wouldn't actually have been possible without the airline structured in such a way, not just having like nice people who work for them, but structured in a way that says, no, this is what we want to make possible. This is what we are all about. And I remember a couple of years ago, my husband was on a Delta flight and he texted me from the airplane and was like, they're showing a video that includes a young man with Down syndrome in the seats of the airplane. And it was just this little indication to our family that like, yeah, Penny is welcome here. They've had posters Delta has on its, when you're, whatever the word is for the, between the gate and the plane, the hallway you stand in. Anyway, whatever that's called.
Jetway.
I'm like, it's gangplank. What is it? Okay, jetway. In the jetway, they've had posters. Exactly. They've had posters of people with disabilities and a whole advertising campaign. And I went onto like their website just to see, and their mission statement also talks about wanting to make flying possible for a whole range of people in a much more inclusive way. And it just really felt like, okay, they're doing that. Like they are actually making that happen. And the other part of the story I haven't told yet is when I first called the Delta agent, we had this kind of very like buttoned up conversation about making sure that, at this point, I didn't know about the gate pass. She didn't tell me. We were just talking about how to get Penny. Will she use a wheelchair? No. What do we do? So we had this whole conversation. And at the end of it, she's like, before we get off the phone, I just want to say, I am so excited for her. And I'm so glad that you are giving Delta the opportunity to have her on our plane. Bravo. And she said, bravo. Wow. So I'm like in tears at this point, which it was, but it was again, this sense of you've got individuals in this company, you've got individuals on our side, and then you've got a structure that actually supports making this all possible. And all of that worked together for it to happen. Yeah, so there are lots of different stories and you can tell the story in lots of different ways, but you're right to pull the thread on there's like a company structure side of things as well as, individuals taking steps forward. And, I think another thing for disability parents, sometimes we talk about the dignity of risk. And so there's a point at which when your child, and this is true for any parent with children, as they're developing, saying, okay, I certainly don't want to put you in a dangerous spot, but if I keep you in a completely safe place all the time, I will inhibit your ability to learn and grow. And so what is that step that's in between completely safe and really risky? And how do I dignify you by allowing you to move into that place? And this felt like this was us trying to figure out when it comes to air travel, what is the step that allows her to take a risk, but not dangerous risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sounds very well managed. And I think there's quite a lot of things I like from that, but I was particularly drawn to the fact that you've got an individual there who wants to help and is going out of her way or his way to help you. And I think that's true of people who go into commercial aviation, generally like people, it's a people orientated business, but the infrastructure and processes can get in the way. So I think what you've got there is actually a double whammy because you've got a concerned individual who's not only wants to help, but is empowered to help and is looking for ways to make it a possible thing, not an impossible thing. And I think the combination of those two things that's quite striking. I love to hear it. I didn't know that. I mean, I know they were, because Virgin, who we're linked to, obviously are linked into Delta, but you only hear snippets of what's actually available. So it's quite reassuring and uplifting to hear stuff like that,
Well, that's certainly how I felt as a mom, but also as just a customer, was just like, oh, I kind of knew. Again, I'd noticed the posters. I'd noticed this young man in this video. But to actually do a little bit more of a deep dive and to see, because I think it can go both ways, where you can have lots of like, good sounding corporate lingo. You can have, people who are included in your videos and whatever, and then not actually have people on the ground who are supportive as individuals and who are making it happen. And it can also go the opposite way, where you've got a gate agent who really wants this to be possible, but you don't have the structures in place in the company. Yeah. But at least for us in this experience, although again, when I shared this online, a lot of people were like, yes, we have had a really good experience in our family when it comes to flying Delta. So as far as I understand it, that is we are not alone in having had that experience.
Well done, Delta.
Yes.
So talk us through the nuts and bolts. And there's two areas I want to ask you about. One is like what you personally did to sort of keep steady yourself. But secondly, probably the one I want to go to first is, so you had the gate pass, you got a pack or something sent to you, a swag bag, you called it.
Mm-hmm.
So from the moment you booked, they sent that out. You didn't ask for that. That's just something they sent out.
No, that was actually because of the post I wrote about the woman saying bravo. It went viral on LinkedIn. And so Delta executives got word of this, and they were really lovely. They just were like, this is really exciting for us as a company. Can we kind of welcome Penny onto the plane? So that is not, unfortunately, something that every person with a disability gets when they're flying with Delta. It would be great if it were, but we had that. And sorry, you were saying.
So then to take us through the sort of, how it actually worked. And I liked that you used a phrase. It sounded like dignity of risk, or is that,
dignity of risk.
I thought that was interesting. So what's that? What's the nuts and bolts of that? Going through a big, busy airport where you're trying to be like a helpful parent, but not kind of an overbearing parent.
Right. Yes. I mean, so much of it is for me physically stepping back and slowing down. So letting my daughter, who again has an intellectual disability and also can speak for herself, can think for herself, and so, but who does move through the world more slowly than I do, and who's doing a lot of these things for the first time. So you put those things together, and I could easily just intercept again and again and again. And so there really was a big need for me every step of the way to slow down and step back and really wait for her to ask me for help rather than giving her the help that I even might have thought she needed at various points along the way. So that was true when we were checking in with the gate agent. That was true going through the, security line. That was true coming out of the security line. I realized she has not looked at a monitor before to try to figure out what her gate is. And, you also have it on your boarding pass. And so just again, being like, we have plenty of time. I'm going to let you figure out where is it that we need to go. And now, as you know, especially in a big airport, there are a lot of ways you might go. And it is really easy as a mom to just like jump in and start. This is the way we're doing it. But my job was really, again, step back, slow down. I'm here to provide as much support as you need and want, and hopefully not an inch more, even though it is very tempting and kind of instinctive to do that. So that was at that, and again, this has been building over the course of many years of being in situations like that. We've never been as comprehensive for Penny about, from the moment we're in the parking lot through getting to the gate, you are in charge. But we've had her go through the security line. When she turned 18, she no longer had access to the TSA pre-check line, which is, one way to do it in America. And so we were like, okay, we as a family are going to go ahead and go through the TSA pre-check line. You go through the regular line and we'll meet you on the other side. So she had that experience once before. So trying again to kind of build one experience at a time, which I do think built her confidence because she knows, I've been in airports before. I've navigated these things with my family, but it's not going to be that different. So I do think all of that has helped to get us all ready.
So when you think about it now, do you think she would be comfortable to just do all of that on her own, like drop her off and say, tally ho, or do you think there's still a bit more work to do?
There's definitely more work to do. And she admitted that because I think there was a part of her on the front end of this trip that kind of was like, I think you could just drop me off. And then once we got into the airport, even though she's been there before, and she started thinking about, oh my gosh, if I were trying to do this by myself, it would just be almost like so scary that you don't even know what to do. I mean, I feel that way. And any new airport, as a 49-year-old woman, I'm still a little bit intimidated and think I might, get on the wrong tram to the such and such. So I totally understand that. So I think moving forward, I mean, if we were to fly in and out of New York again, it would probably be a very similar experience right now where we would have someone accompany her all the way to the gate. Probably the next step would be for that to be like a Delta agent rather than her parent, but we wouldn't even do that yet. We also, we live in Connecticut, which is a small state in the United States, and we have a couple small airports here. So I think that would be the place where we would be like, okay, we're going to go in with you to the security line, but not through the security line. And I'm going to stay on the other side of the security line until you tell me that you are on that airplane. Like I'm going to be right here, but I'm also not going to go all the way with you. You know, if there are 20 gates in an airport in the whole thing, I think you can find it, but I'll be here in case you can't, you know? So I think those are the types of things. And this again will happen over the course of years. I think that's the other thing I've found as having a child with an intellectual disability is that learning and growth is often just stretched out over a longer period of time. You know, with my son, he basically flew alone with very little support. The first time I walked into the airport with him, the second time I dropped him off at the curb. You know, like it just was a much quicker process. With his sister, she's going to get there and it's going to take longer, and that's just fine.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you then, gone out of my head. I'm sure it'll come back.
All right.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm sure I'm buffering. I'll cut this bit out.
Yeah. No. That's the nice thing about podcasts. You can take your time coming up with what you want to say next.
Something that you said, I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's gone. Never mind.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sure there was, anyway. So I think what I was thinking about was if you have to sort of sum up an approach then for anybody that's thinking about daughter or son traveling. And what I was going to say, actually, I was thinking that I think that's remarkable because I was thinking about some of your airports. And when you're talking about, you've got it on your boarding card and then you also get it on the gate. So many times I've been through the States and they're so massive and so easy to lose yourself because they just go on and on and on. And then I've missed that they've changed the gate. And I was thinking it's actually very complicated going, if you don't know the airport and you're trying to, there's so much sensory overload that I think it's remarkable what she's done because it's stressful for anyone. And I thought I was going to say it was just like that's actually quite impressive for anybody to get through one of your airports. But they are huge, and when they change, I remember coming back recently from somewhere in the US, and I was like, I was completely the wrong terminal, and although it might all seem very easy and on the little map, but it's very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, all of us have had experiences, all of us who fly regularly, of whether it's a delay or a gate change or even just like losing track of time and then being like, oh my gosh, I now I'm going to be running to get to my gate. And I think there are a couple things there that I've had to think about. One is, okay, so the worst case scenario is she misses her plane. And is she prepared to know what to do in that case? Whether that is to call your mom and, well, what if for some reason I don't pick up the phone? What are you going to do? It's like, okay, you're going to go and find someone who has a uniform on and can help you. So just again, recognizing there are people who are making mistakes in airports every single day. And there are people who want to help other people in airports every single day. It doesn't mean everyone's that way, but trying to really be like, okay, let's build in some expectation of not getting it all right all the time. Again, right now with Penny, like I am probably, or her dad, or like one of us is going to be there with her, for longer than we might with our other kids, as far as going to the gate or even just like waiting on the other side of security until we know she's on the airplane or whatever. But at the same time, trying to build those muscles of actually when things don't go according to plan, I think is a part of our job as a parent is trying not to anticipate everything that might go wrong, but to prepare our kids to know that like asking for help is a part of being human. You get to do that. Here are some ways you can do that. I think that's another piece of this that's probably, I'm glad you bring it up because it's important for us to recognize that it's not always going to go like perfectly. There always are going to be things that you don't expect, and we can handle that.
That's it. I'm glad you said that. So let's just bring it all sort of together then. Somebody's listening now. I'll come back to the question I started a second ago. And somebody's listening and they think, well, I've got somebody, a young adult, somebody, or even a youngish person. They're going to be traveling on their own, a bit worried. What would you advise they do? What in steps? What's the easiest way for them to approach that, apart from fly with Delta?
So I'm going to give kind of two answers. One is we did actually put together a list of things that we used AI because we'd gotten so many comments with advice. And we asked AI to actually compile a list of advice for exactly what you just asked. And that is available like on my website. And I can give it to you for the show notes or whatever. But it's how to prepare for a solo flight, advice from families. So this is what all sorts of other people actually said. And I'll read a couple of those things. Just get gate passes so someone can escort your child to and from the gate. Like that's an easy one, right? Plan for delays, cancellations, and other disruptions. That was the second most often thing that people said. Use disability assistance services. Recognize that those are possible. Those exist. So, and it goes on from there with less, kind of broad steps to take. But I still think those are all like helpful comments for me for parents. In terms of but there's a bigger picture answer I also want to give. You and I were talking before we started recording about the fact that I have a podcast. And the one that I think is probably most relevant to listeners here would be a podcast called Take the Next Step. And the idea there is that we can imagine a good future and take small steps towards that good future when disability is a part of our story. Yeah. And we talk about 3 things that allow us to do that. Start with delight, connect to community, and take the next step. And I just think this story actually falls into that umbrella, like in a pretty cool way, because we're starting with delight. Penny wanted to fly. So this is not something she was being forced to do. It was not something that was a sensory overload experience. This was a delight experience for her, which didn't mean there weren't obstacles, but there was a sense of kind of building on something that she already wanted and that we were excited for her about. So that was the first thing. Second, connect to community. This was not something we were trying to do alone. And we've already talked a lot about that, whether that was people on the line giving advice or Delta being structured in a way that was ready to receive her, or my friend saying, yeah, I'll drive to the airport and come to the gate on the other side. So you're not alone. Like, connect to your community, get people, strangers and friends around you to help make this happen. And then finally, take the next step. Like, we were not trying to go from, Penny having never flown alone to her, getting an Uber to the airport and, walking herself to the gate at LaGuardia. That's many, many steps away. So it was like, well, what's the one next step in terms of her being able to, down the line, be able to fly independently? So I think those are not like practical tips, but they are, for me, helpful in terms of not being too overwhelmed, not feeling really isolated and alone, and being encouraged that even those small steps actually do move us towards a good future. Yeah, personally, and also for our families, and honestly, for our world. I think, as I've said, one of the encouraging things about this is that other people were really excited that Penny was able to fly without us. It wasn't just her family that felt that way.
Well, so what we need now, as a promise, when you send your stuff through, obviously you can put all the bits you mentioned. We need a picture of on the aircraft or whatever with you.
I can give you one. I can give you one of her mother watching her get on the aircraft and my friend watching her get off the aircraft. But I don't have one on the aircraft because she was there alone. And she's like, it's not a big deal. I'm not taking a picture.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll happily take those too. And so if you could just name check now. So you said you had a website. If you could let us know, you say that now as well, in case anybody's listening.
Sure. So it's amyjuliabecker.com. So just my full name.com. And there are links there to all the other things, whether that's like social media accounts or the podcast I just mentioned is called Take the Next Step. So there are lots of different ways to find me and interact with all of this. And, if you search Delta, you'll get lots of posts about what we've been talking about if you're on my website. Yeah,
amazing. And great shout out as well to Delta for what they did. And you just need a few airlines to do things like that, because then it just sets the bar, doesn't it? So I'm not saying that other airlines don't do things, but it's great to hear an example of a well-known airline, a large airline that is taking the time to do something which is, it's not an easy fix, but they've put the effort in to change the infrastructure, to train people up, and to change their sort of mission and methodology so that it makes this possible. And I think it's a great message for all airlines that perhaps that maybe haven't caught up yet. I think most airlines now. I know it is something that they're all trying to do, but that was just a great example of what you shared. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be able to share the story. And yes, I know that there are certainly ways we can continue to improve travel experiences for people with disabilities. I'm also glad to be able to say that it did go well for her, and I'm really grateful.
Excellent. Well, Amy Julia, that was brilliant and very, very informative. Some lovely tips in there, and some links as well, which will help people who are looking to get that extra bit of help and reassurance, and the fact that it went well, that you're not put off, you can do it again. And, you know, more than anything, Penny enjoyed it. It was no big deal for her getting on the flight. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Couldn't end better, could it really?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to have gotten to tell the story.